Good morning, everyone. Pete Pardo here from Sea of Tranquility. Welcome to another edition of Classic Album War. Today is day 2, and I'm not going to mention this every single day, but we're going on a trip through classic live albums, okay, for the next month or so. We'll see how long it takes us, where we're going to look at, compare, discuss, put into battle, so to speak, 2 classic live albums by some classic or maybe not so classic bands, right? But notable live albums. Just keep in mind, everyone, this is all for fun. All right? We get all sorts of weird comments from people that are like, I don't know why any of these albums need to battle each other and they were not recorded to be put into battle. And I'm like, come on. All right, let's just get over that, please. This is just an excuse to take a look at 2 classic bands, classic albums, in this case, classic live albums. Talk about why we love them so much, and just for fun, just like you would if you were sitting in a bar with someone having a discussion about classic albums, right? Someone's going to say they like one over the other. You're going to talk about why, that sort of thing. So please, everybody, have fun with this. Stop taking this so literally. The more people watch these videos, the more crazy comments I'm getting from people. It's like, oh, there's no comparison to that band. You can't put anything up against that band or that album. And these albums were never meant to be put into battle. There's no point in doing these shows. I mean, would you like me to just not do them at all? I mean, I can certainly do that. The reason why I'm doing these is because this type of format has been asked for by hundreds and hundreds of our viewers. All right, so that's why I'm doing them. They're fun. Gives me an excuse to pull some great albums out of my collection, compare and talk about them, discuss them, right? That's what it's all about. In hopes that people out there watching and listening maybe haven't checked these albums out ever, and it'll prompt them to go do so. Or maybe the folks who haven't listened to them in a long time, it'll prompt them to go do so. That's the point. It's just to give some love to the music. So don't take too seriously the fact that it's called Classic Album War, that I may talk about boxing terminology and all that kind of stuff. Just, that's the fun part of it, all right? Just have fun with these shows, all right? So today, 2 behemoths. This is probably the matchup that I've been asked about the most in the last bunch of weeks when I started hinting that I was going to do live album battles here, live album wars, right? We've got Deep Purple's Made in Japan. Oh, and another thing, some people are like, oh, I can't believe you're holding up CDs and you're not holding up albums. Well, I have CDs. I don't have LPs. All right. I gave up my LP collection 25, 30 years ago. All right. I've been collecting CDs now since the late 80s. I've got like 9,000 plus of them. That's what you're going to see because that's what I own. All right. End the story there. Made in Japan from Deep Purple. Recorded December 1972 in Osaka, Japan, and in Tokyo, Japan. All right, the Festival Hall and the Nippon Budokan. All right, the Nippon Budokan, the famous Budokan. All right. And on the other end of the spectrum, recorded in 1973, released in 1975 this came out in, I believe. Hold on. I'll tell you in a second. I believe it was 1996, sorry, guys. We've got Led Zeppelin's The Song Remains the Same. Okay. Recorded from concerts, or a concert at, actually a series of concerts in July of 1973 at New York's Madison Square Garden. This live album meant to be the soundtrack to the Song Remains the Same film of the same name. Okay, so let's and just so you know, some of you might have the original vinyl releases, and you're going to hear me talking about tracks that don't appear on those vinyl releases. Well, I'm going to be talking about the CD reissues that basically put back in tracks that should have been on the original, okay? Because that's what I have. That's what I've upgraded to. That's what I got. And quite frankly, both of these albums made better by the inclusion of those extra songs. So let's go to Deep Purple's Made in Japan. Probably for me, after Kiss Alive and Kiss Alive 2, the live album that had the most impact on my life. And I can probably safely say the live album that I have played the most out of all the ones I have throughout my life. This was one of the top 3, 4, 5 album soundtracks to my youth. Okay? Most people consider this one of the greatest live albums of all time. It takes those handful of songs, stretches them out to epic lengths, all sorts of crazy jamming and improvisations going on here. It's a classic, treasured album for a reason. All right. the Mark II version of the band at the height of their power. So we got Richie Blackmore on guitar, Ian Gillan on vocals, Ian Pace on drums, John Lord on keyboards, Hammond organ mostly, and of course Roger Glover on bass. So what do we have on this stupendous live album? All right. So, of course it's in black, so got to use the glasses here. All right. So CD 1, all right, or album 1, whatever you want to call it, kicks off with Highway Star. As great as the studio version is, man, Highway Star in here is legendary. All right, a little bit longer, lengthier solos from Lord and Blackmore, just fantastic. Gillan screaming up a storm. Gillan is on fire on this whole little jaunt they did in Japan, right? What else we got? Child in Time, epic length, even longer than the studio version. I used to sit and listen to Child in Time from this very live album. Back when I had the LP, I used to sit in front of my stereo with the speakers on either side, rocking, sitting, square-legged on the floor, rocking back and forth, just totally getting into playing air guitar to the Richie's incredible solo, all right? Playing air Hammond, screaming along with Ian, man, it's just epic stuff, all right? Then, of course, you got a lengthy version of Smoke on the Water on here, all right? I know most of us don't need to hear Smoke on the Water ever again, but it's pretty damn good on this album. Then, of course, you got the Mule, the Great Mule, with a lengthy Ian Pace drum solo. A lot of solos on this album, guys. Then, of course, Strange Kind of Woman. All right, pretty rockin' version of that. Then you got the incredible Lazy, the bluesy Lazy. Got a lot of great interplay between Blackmore and Lord. And then a mammoth version of Space Truckin', with all sorts of crazy solos, 25 minutes of it? Something like that. It's pretty damn long. Okay, for the CD reissue, throws in a couple tracks that were played during those shows, but not included on the original live album, right? So you've got the encores, Black Knight. How could they have left Black Knight off of the original LP? Crazy to think of that. And it's awesome, okay? As is Speed King. All right? So you got Black Knight and Speed King, in addition to Lucille. I mean, I know the band was playing Lucille a lot back in those days because, of course, a bunch of them were, into that kind of early rock and roll stuff. And I mean, a lot of bands were doing that at the time. Uriah Heep was doing the old rock and roll medley, and Scorpions did it a few years later. But, Lucille's fun for what it is. But, just the inclusion of Black Knight and Speed King make this classic live album even better. All right, over on to the other side of the ring. These two heavyweights coming in equally at 215 pounds. That's actually pretty light for a heavyweight nowadays, but that's okay. The song remains the same, right? So, also a really good live album. It's arguable. A lot of people talk about Led Zeppelin, and, this was their, official live album back in the day. They've released, you got Live at the BBC, which is spectacular, all right? Then How the West Was Won, which might probably even better. We'll get to those another time, right? Hopefully we'll do these live album wars for so long that we'll get to include all of the kind of lesser-known ones, or the ones that were released, later on, but, contain recordings from the classic era. We're going to try and get to a lot of that stuff. So fear not, for all of you who have been asking. Hope you cover some of the more recent live albums from the classic period from some of these great bands. I'm going to try and get to all of these. All right. So what do we have on here? Again, the original double album contains, a lot of cool stuff, which was included in the movie. All right, they've recently, in recent years, on their remaster reissue of these, they've added back in some of the tracks, which is great, performed at the Garden, right? So we've got, kicking it off, Rock and Roll. I am not a fan of that song, all right? It's okay on here. I'm just not a fan of the song, and I quite frankly think that these guys, they get better throughout this performance, or, as opposed to, kicking off with Rock and Roll, a little sloppy. All right, a little disjointed. It could just be because I'm not a fan of the song. And then we've got Celebration Day. Just the fact that we're here in Celebration Day live, awesome, right? Love it on here. Black Dog, pretty potent on here. That's thrown in, right? With Nice to See. Over the Hills and Far Away, awesome. All right, Misty Mountain Hop. It's great how a lot of these songs being put back in to the set, making this like the ultimate Zeppelin live album, right? What else? Since I've Been Loving You. my favorite version of Since I've Been Loving You. It is just stellar on this album. And, watching it during the movie, it's just like, Page's guitar solo. Killer people. No Quarter. My favorite version of No Quarters on here as well. You got The Song Remains the Same, upbeat and snappy, love it. What else? The Rain Song performed very well on this evening, okay? On this album from the evening was taken. What else? The Ocean, kicking ass on here, right? Disc 2, you've got the lengthy Dazed and Confused. For my money, hearing Dazed and Confused just on album alone, on this particular album, kind of get the same feeling I do listening to like Mountain Jam on live Allman Brothers. I think Dazed and Confused, this epic length Dazed and Confused, is better when you're watching the film because you get all the weird visuals and all that kind of wacky stuff going on during it. On here, lately anyway, I tend to kind of skip over that. I'd rather hear a more truncated version of Dazed and Confused, but it's still cool nonetheless. It's got some really wicked parts to it, obviously. Stairway to Heaven, also a little lengthier here, performed admirably. Moby Dick, of course, with a Bonham drum solo. Heartbreaker, and Whole Lot of Love to kind of kick it all off. All sorts of wacky jamming and things going on, and a Whole Lot of Love and what have you. So, both albums, pretty lengthy, a lot of jamming and improvisations. For some might be a little on the bloated side, but that was the thing about live albums back in the day. That's what you looked for. A lot of live albums that you've seen in more recent years and decades are very, songs all played exactly like the studio versions, not a lot of, solos and interplay and all that kind of stuff. That was the joy of the 70s, man. It's like it was the era of all this experimentation and improvisation and all that. You don't see that anymore. So a lot of the live albums released in the 70s and even the late 60s had that quality, had those elements. And I miss that because it made the live album something really different to listen to because the songs all were a little bit different, right? They had as opposed to getting cookie cutter versions of the studio tracks, which is, a lot of bands you go see play today or even in the last 20 or so years, they're not really doing anything special. They're delivering the songs to you exactly like you hear them on the radio or heard it on the original album. And to a lot of people, that's what they want. They want perfect representations, perfect renditions of the songs they know. Whereas back in the 70s especially, you wanted to hear and see the band do something a little bit different. You didn't mind if they would go into Waters Uncharted, right? Go into Stratospheres Unmanned. You looked forward to that. And the live albums really, really captured that drama, that danger, that sense of experimentation, okay? And that's what made these so special. That's why the live albums released in, maybe the late 80s and the 90s and more recently, it depends on the band, of course, but they're good, but it's just like, it sounds just like the studio versions, right? With maybe a little bit of audience applause here and there. So a lot of the live albums that we're going to be talking over in the coming weeks have that extra special quality like these do. For some people, I've spoken to many people over the years who don't like either of these albums because it's like, oh my God, the songs are too damn long, too many damn solos. It's just, okay, it's boring, can't listen to it. Not for me. Not for me. That's why, again, I can't listen to these all the time, right? Obviously. And I will say I've probably played both of these albums so many times in my life that I don't listen to them as much anymore, but that's more because of kind of oversaturation than anything else. Not that I don't like them. When I actually do sit down to put either one of these on, especially this one, I'm just like, now I remember why I loved it so much back when I was, 13, 14, 15, 16, 18 years old, 25 years old, whatever. It's still great. They're both still great. So, of course, that leads us into which one do I prefer out of these two? I mean, come on. It's got to be Made in Japan. They're my favorite band of all time. Like I said, this was like the soundtrack to my youth. Not that this wasn't, just not as much. I always like Deep Purple a little bit more than Led Zeppelin. I do love this album a lot. I love this band. I love both these bands to death, right? But when it comes down to it, which one do I reach for? Which one did I reach for back in the day? I gotta give it to Deep Purple. There's just a again, these shows were done on purpose with, they were going to film them and all that kind of stuff. I think that there are moments on here that is not quite Zeppelin in their absolute best, at their absolute best, I should say, although it's damn good, right? Here is a band that's just, like I said, firing on all cylinders. There's just not a weak moment on, other than maybe if you don't like the Lucille cover, right? But other than that, man, this is just, these guys were just going for the jugular here. And just a series of great performances captured on audio, right? Just very special stuff. Could you imagine if we had like full concert film of these Japan shows from that year? Woo! Sadly enough, this lineup would be no more shortly thereafter. Okay, I think the constant touring and the egos obviously, got to them. Blackmore and Gillan did not get along at all. We're not getting along right about this time and going forward for the next year or so. And then poof, Gillan and Glover are gone. Coverdale and Hughes are in. That's a story for another day, which we've covered quite a bit here on the channel. You can go to our History of Deep Purple video in the History of playlist and check all that out. But for today, curious to hear what you guys think, what your opinions are, which one you like better. Maybe you like them both equally. That's cool too. But more importantly, what do you like about both of them, right? What makes these two so special? All right. Is it the blistering guitar work of Ritchie Blackmore, probably at his best here? Is it the uncanny drums of John Bonham and the expert guitar playing on all sorts of different styles from Jimmy Page? What do you love about these albums? That's more important, actually, than who wins or loses, because there's no winners or losers here. These are both fantastic albums, okay? No right or wrong answer here, but, this is just a cool time to discuss two really cool live albums and what we really love about each one or both, right? So this is on the web at www.seatranquility.org. We're on Facebook, we're on Twitter. Of course, we're here on YouTube every day. We've got more classic live album wars coming up tomorrow and every day going forward. So we'll see you then, guys. Take care. Bye-bye.